Happy Wednesday, guys. Excited to keep the conversation going around carbohydrate metabolism, diving into timing and food choices today. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about anaerobic metabolism, energy systems. Now we're going to take some of what we learned, dive a little bit deeper into what actually happens in your body when you're using those energy systems, and then how we can think about fueling and timing. So I know this is one that a lot of people are excited for based on kind of some of the questions and comments that I've seen in the Signal group. If anything here doesn't make sense, please reach out, let me know, or let me know if you need help on your individual plan. So when we talk about our approach to carbohydrates, I always want to just reflect back on first principles. So making sure that we're focusing on an overall strategy that supports energy balance towards our goal is a key starting point, and achieving that with quality foods, right? So at the bottom of the pyramid, we have energy balance. That means calories in versus calories out. Are we eating enough to support our goal, and also not going too far away from that could actually hinder and hurt our goal? So we talked a little bit about the glycolytic pathway yesterday and how our body will break down glucose in order to produce energy. And so that flow of glucose is really key, because we can get glucose in two ways, well, multiple ways, but we can get it from glycogen, which is just a chain of glucose. We saw that glucose is a little molecule, right? Glycogen is just a storage form of glucose in the body, and it gets stored in the liver primarily, and then also in our working muscles, right? Our skeletal muscle tissue. And so when we have high blood sugar, so say we just ate a big meal, it's going to stimulate the release of insulin and tells our pancreas, hey, we need to store a bunch of this, right? Insulin is a storage hormone. It's going to tell the liver, hey, we don't need to be making glucose and releasing it. We need to be resynthesizing it, restore it as glycogen. When we have low blood sugar, for example, maybe we went on a long hike and we haven't eaten anything, it's telling our body kind of the whole time, hey, we need to release it, get as much glycogen out as possible. We need the energy. And remember also that there are other energy systems at play, transferring fat into fuel as well. We'll get more into that next week. But this is a constant cycle that's going on in our body, back and forth, either turning it up or turning it back down, so we can maintain homeostasis and meet our energy demands for whatever's in front of us. So what happens during and after exercise? One big thing I want to call out is that glycogen is released from muscle and liver, but also we have something called a GLUT4 transporter. Those are little channels, little gates, almost like if you think about sticking a straw into a cell, little Capri Sun, and it's gonna let the juice flow from outside to inside, right? It's gonna help bring that glucose into the cell so it can undergo that process of glycolysis. That's really key, because these transporters aren't always active. They're not always creating these open doors for glucose to flow through. They're activated by activity because they know glucose is going to be needed. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can apply this concept of using glucose as fuel for our workouts. And I'm going to use kind of my own personal example in three different scenarios. One, if I'm just maintaining kind of my normal day-to-day, what I would do if I was trying to increase activity or gain muscle or put on some weight, and also what I would do if I was trying to lose some fat. So let's walk through a day of Nolan, eating 3,200 calories and getting 50% of those from carbs, which would be about a 400-gram carbohydrate day. So typically I like to eat first meal around 8:30 in the morning right before work. I might have done a light walk or an easy spin on the bike before that. And I don't like to eat a ton of carbs at breakfast, but it is important to get some. So I usually eat fruit, usually 1 to 2 different types of fruit. Sometimes it's, a banana and a couple clementines. It could be an apple and some berries. But making sure I'm getting a little bit of slow digesting carbohydrate, right? And notice that my choices throughout the day reflect, do I need fast carbs or do I need slow carbs? So moving on to lunch, eat around 12:30, and I would try to have a bigger meal carbohydrate-wise. So I'm in the middle of the day, even though I'm not, super active during the day with work. I usually stand while I work, and I will try to, be lightly active and just make sure I step away from the computer and walk around and do stuff. And I'm also thinking about setting up my evening training session. So I have a bigger carbohydrate meal for lunch. Usually that's going to be rice and veggies. Notice this is still not, super high glycemic. I am having white rice a lot of the time because it does digest easier for me, but I pair that with a ton of veggies, so it still breaks down slowly. I'm not getting a big insulin spike yet in the day. My pre-workout meal, this tends to either be a supplement or some fruit, again about 50 grams of carbs. And really the goal for this is starting to get some carbs available in my bloodstream, because I know I'm about to go train and head to the gym maybe around 4:30 or so. So while I'm at the gym, while I'm training from maybe say 4:30 to 6:30, I would sip on just a carbohydrate beverage, a drink. This is my preferred way to keep some fuel going, as well as some electrolytes and some hydration during my workout. And then as soon as I get home, I'm trying to eat dinner as quickly as possible. And this is my biggest meal of the day typically, and I'm gonna hit probably more rice and veggies. I might also hit maybe some fast carbs, like something like a glass of orange juice, fresh squeeze. And I'm doing that because my body is so able to receive those carbohydrates, and I know I'm gonna be able to store it back in that muscle as fuel, right? We talked about the GLUT4 transporters and opening those channels to say, my muscle cell is able to receive that right now. My liver cells are able to receive that right now. So I know that even though I might have a sugary glass of orange juice, it's not going to get stored as fat because it just circulates in my blood until insulin says we need to store this somewhere. It's actually going to go where I want it to go to fuel my next training. So if I was trying to gain weight or increase training volume, I would increase my calories by 250 to maybe 500 calories increase. So I was at 3,200, I'd bump it up to about 3,700. If you're on the smaller side, I would go towards the low end. If you're on the bigger side, I would be okay with the higher end, right? As a percentage of your total calories. I'd keep the same macro percentage split if I was focused on weight gain, and I would split it up throughout the day. So I just add a little bit more to each meal. I find that's easier for me than trying to eat, extra meals or trying to have one really big meal at a time extra. So just add a little bit more to each one. You might feel a little bit more full at times. If you're really trying to put on weight, sometimes that can be hard. It's chore to eat food, which I know some people are, rolling their eyes right now. But if you're a hard gainer or someone who doesn't have a big appetite, that can totally be true. And if I was trying to just increase training volume or just focus on maybe like 2-a-day sessions, I would really try to only increase all those 250 to 500 calories as carbohydrate and focus those around my workout sessions. And I'll show you what I mean. So if I was increasing to 500 grams of carbs, remember I was at 400 before, I would keep a pretty similar breakfast. It's just the way I like to eat in the morning. I don't want to change that. But I would add a ton at lunch. So I was at 100 grams before. I would probably achieve that through adding a piece of fruit to lunch and maybe a little bit of extra serving of rice. My pre-workout meal would be similar. I might, rather than just having, a supplement or fruit, I might add some oatmeal, oatmeal, berries, a little bit of almond butter as something as like a pre-workout meal. During training, I would increase the amount of carbs I'm taking in as well. And I would keep a pretty similar dinner. In the past, I have played around with something called carb backloading, where you eat the majority of your carbs only post-workout. The reason that doesn't work for me right now is it's just too late in the evening, and I find it interrupts my sleep to have a big meal right before bed. Especially if it takes me like an hour to eat. If I spend from 7 to 8 eating and I'm trying to go to bed by 9:30, it's just not going to work. So let's focus on if I was trying to lose fat. If I was trying to tone down. Maybe it's summertime, I'm getting ready for the beach. Maybe I'm trying to switch to doing a triathlon or focusing on running, and I know that my current weight is not ideal for that. I'm going to decrease calories by 255 to 500. Notice that same number here. We don't want to go crazy when we adjust and manipulate our calories. We're going to remove those calories primarily from our carbohydrate intake. And so remember before I said if I was trying to gain weight, I would probably split those evenly. If I'm trying to lose weight, I want to mostly take those away as carbs. The reason is I do not want to see a decrease in protein because I don't want you to lose. I want you to spare as much muscle mass as possible as you're trying to burn fat and lose weight. And I also want you to get enough fat because that is usually more satiating. And also we want to focus on getting enough, essential fatty acids and other things to support hormone production, all the benefits that fat gives us. I would also focus on shortening my eating window. So for example, you notice in my previous example, I said eating from 8:30 to say 7, finishing around 7:30, 8 o'clock. I would tighten that up a little bit. I think I forgot to do that in my example, but usually trying to focus on like the 10 to 6 window, maybe bring my eating just into an 8 to 10 hour window as opposed to say a 12-hour window. And what that lets me do is spend a little bit more time fat burning on the edges without a huge loss in, I'm not losing a ton of calories or a ton of performance. I don't like super small feeding windows. I know some people have done intermittent fasting where they only eat for like 2 or 4 hours a day. I think that's too small, and I think the risk of losing muscle is too great if you're taking that approach. But I like, something in the 6 to 8 hour window is very achievable. And I would add fasted light activity in the morning, again, for this fat burning, just because as you're coming off this long fast, you're going to be burning fat at the highest rate as a fuel source. So doing light activity, this does not mean an intense workout. So if you're an early AM CrossFitter, maybe not the path to do fasted high intensity, but do what works for you. Again, this is about you figuring out your journey. I'm here to just give you as many paths as possible. One last thing I'll add to this losing fat concept is do not try to constantly be in a caloric deficit. Set a time window for how long you are going to be in a losing fat mode and then shift back to a maintenance mode. Your maintenance mode, if you lost a ton of weight, might be still at a lower calorie amount, right? So say if I eat, typically 3,200 calories and then I go down to 2,800 and I lose 10 pounds, well, now my baseline is probably not 3,200 anymore. It might be down to 3,000. But I'm still going to increase my calories a little bit so my body knows, hey, you're okay, you're getting enough. It makes weight loss more sustainable in the long term. And also it gives you a chance to fight a little battle, back off, not do a full, relapse and just go back to eating whatever you want, right? But take little measured attacks at, I'm going to focus on losing 1 to 2 pounds over a 3-week period. And then I'm going to hold and stabilize for a week and then see if I can do it again. And, keep chipping away in that way. If you have more questions around that, I'm happy to dive deeper with you. But I'm going to get this video wrapped up for other folks. So talking through that example, notice I'm keeping my same breakfast. It's my lowest carb meal, but lunch gets a little bit smaller. Again, I'm probably beefing up the veggies and toning down the rice a little bit. I might even cut rice out from that meal and really only keep it to my post-workout meal. And then again, I would keep that same kind of pre-workout snack. I would keep my same supplement. Again, these are the times that I'm earning and burning my carbs, and so I want to keep those in there. And then I'm reducing it during other times of the day where I'm focusing on just eating more low glycemic carbs that are still high nutrient value because they're mostly veggies. And again, I tone down that kind of meal 5, that dinner meal, again, by toning down the rice, but maybe it's okay there if I did an evening training session. My body's going to know what to do with it. And in this example, you see I went down to 2,800 calories from 32 and from 400 down to 300 in carbohydrate. So action of the day, share if you're trying to gain muscle or improve performance, or you're on the burning fat or weight loss train. And I want to hear just one decision that you're making around carbohydrates that is supporting your goal. Can't wait to hear it.